music makers.
Lovely.
Music creates many moods. It can give a feeling of sensual promise. It can be rural and reassuring. Or it can create a feeling of brooding menace and unease. The man who lives here near Haywards Heath works to create these moods and many more. For Joe Campbell is one half of Joe & Co., one of the UK's top music writing teams, who write for commercials both here and in the United States. Their credits range from Carling Black Label to Dettol, and their Kit Kat Pandas commercial won this year's Creative Circle Award for Best Use of Music. Every day, Joe travels from Sussex to the studio in Soho he shares with partner Paul Hart. Today, they have a typical client coming in, a TV company who need 30 seconds of title music for a series of films, the first of which is the film you're watching at the moment. The producer is David Pick.
So I need a SIG tune. It's an arts programme, I suppose, but it's not an arty-farty arts programme. So I'm looking for something that's sort of light and cheerful. And just to make life difficult for you, I'd like you to try to make the tune, if you could, reflect the various forms of music that we're dealing with in the series. One is about opera, about the way the Arts Council murdered Kent Opera. Another one is about street musicians. Another one is about a museum of keyboard instruments, harpsichords, clavichords, so on. A programme on jazz, and a programme about a military band, the Royal Marine Band. They're letting us, you know, they had that disaster last year when they... And they're letting us in to see how they've been getting on since the bomb. So, really, I'm looking for a tune that will move from an operatic to street musician style, harpsichord, jazz, and finish with something very martial.
Is this going to be reflected in the graphics, or are they...
Yeah.
Maximum 30 seconds.
That's right.
To actually do this in. And basically we've taken the idea and put it in order, and there's quite a few elements in there, but they're all fairly fluid things that whatever your music suggests, we can change it.
We're both right, and I think that's what's unique about us, is that whenever you come and give us a brief, or whoever gives us a brief, there's always two angles at it. I mean, over the years, I think our writing has become almost one.
Northumberland-born Joe Campbell started his musical career in a military band before auditioning for lessons on the double bass with Dewsbury musician Ernie Eisen.
I remember the first audition I had, really, which was from him, where I went along one Sunday morning with this dreadful hangover because I'd stayed the night up in London with some chums. And he said, "Look, Mr. Campbell, I don't want you to..." And he was a very proud man. He said, "I don't want you to waste my time. And I don't want to waste your time, because it's a lot of money, you know." I think it was about £1 a lesson or something, you know. So I played the scale of B major, probably on remote control because of my hangover or whatever. And he said, "Oh, we'll have a coffee. I'll get Dottie," which is his wife, and 2 coffees. And he said, "Mr. Campbell," and my heart sank, and he said, "Do you know, you've got the finest hand I've ever seen on a double bass. It'd be a pleasure to teach you." Well, I've got a bit of scribbling. So we start off with the jazz thing.
Could we go in the minor, maybe?
Once they've both written down their ideas for the series theme, Paul works out an arrangement and sets about making a demo for the client to consider.
Okay, lovely.
Just seems a better noise.
Paul studied music at the Royal College before going on the road with John Dankworth.
I ended up touring the world with Clear Lane and Dankworth for about 6 years. Got a little bit better at the piano playing in the process, and actually learnt quite a lot about writing from John. I used to sort of help him out when he had a heavy schedule, and that was really quite an invaluable training ground, I suppose, you know. The theory of composition, everything one learns at college, is quite different when it's put into practice and you've got to finish it before tomorrow morning, you know. He introduced me to Joe when Joe was short of an arranger. It was in between trips for me. I used to do a bit of studio work and a bit of writing here and there. And so every time I get back off a tour, I used to phone Joe up and say I'm back if there's anything going, and we got on really well.
Joe played in the Royal Philharmonic before setting up Joe & Co. with Paul in the mid-70s, though there's some confusion about the first project they actually collaborated on.
It was for J-Kloss. It was part of a Strauss waltz with a little singing group, and it went, "You've got to have holes, lots of holes, all you really need are holes," and there was all these little holes animated inside this washing machine singing.
It was for Supercook part work, and I think there was something like 8 or 9 commercials, all depicting a different opera, and it was things like boiled beef and carrots, lamb and cabbage stew, you know, things like that, you know.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
It's the first time I ever met Paul, and he came in all shuffling along. He hasn't changed one iota. It's the same shambolic person, but I think, you know, shrouding a fantastic genius, absolutely. And he did it, and it was so much, and I'd done another track with him prior, and I remember him coming in and going, is there any chance of being paid? Just bought this house for my girlfriend, and with this money I can buy the utilities without going to the bank, you know. And I said, "Were you sure?" I said, "Well, I might be a bit short." So I wrote him a cheque out for 250 quid and I said, "Look, there you go, you owe me an arrangement." And I think that kind of sealed a partnership that's been unique.
One of their regular clients is advertising agency J. Walter Thompson. Today they've come in to record a jazzed-up version of the Lean Cuisine theme so they can pitch for the account. How different does Paul find the approach of the various agencies they work with?
Well, some of them are very specific. I mean, some of them are really eloquent in what they want. Some of them can actually quote you specific musical examples of orchestration or little fragments of tune that they like. Others really just go, well, help, it's, you know, the film's not working, we really need some music to tie it together. What do you recommend? So they're really from two ends of the spectrum, you know.
The deputy head of television at the agency is Alistair Fryer.
We always try, and it must be said, right from the early script stage. We often have creative groups who come in and they just write at the top of the script, music throughout. And we always try to say to them, well, what do you mean music throughout? Explain to us. Because if you're going to brief somebody like Joe Campbell or Paul Hart, if you're going to brief them musically, you've got to know what you want them to say and what response they are to give you. So therefore, we try and get the creative groups to think very much about music, not as an afterthought that you put on the film afterwards like you would score a movie or whatever, but it's an inherent part of the creative idea.
Oh, really? Great. That's wrong. Can I just talk to him?
What's the verdict?
Actor and musician Paul Jones of Manfred Mann and the Blues Band arrives to record the harmonica track.
Yes?
Great.
You don't want one of those on the end of the middle eight?
Yeah.
I
I remember one night at CBS Studios, we had Studio 1, 2 and 3 going at the same time, just the two of us. We had a symphony orchestra in one and Dixieland band in another, and I think I had a vocal session going on the other one. It was madness.
At any one time, Joe and Paul may be thinking up 10 to 15 tunes simultaneously. What do they each bring to the mix?
Paul does all our arrangements, because I could sit down and arrange a symphony orchestra for, say, Vauxhall Cars in 2 days, and he'll do it in about 3 hours. And that's the total difference. He's so fast.
Right, where is he?
Joe does a lot of the administrative work. He sorts out how we're going to fit a session in before the next one has to start.
How are you, love? All right.
He sorts out the money, talks to people who's going to come down to the sessions. But I mean, we each have an input into the writing. Joe doesn't actually physically write down a lot. I mean, he does now and then, but I'd just say probably 50% of the work originates in Joe's head, as in mine, you know.
Great.
Joe's main form of relaxation is golf, but even on the golf course, his mind is seldom far from the job.
It's quite extraordinary. I mean, this happened only again the other day. I had a panic job come in. Joe was playing golf. Surprise, surprise. So I sort of trundled off into town, and he phoned up in the middle of it from his mobile and said, "Oh, what's going on?" So I said, "What's this little march thing, you see?" So he said, "I'll have a think about that while I'm on the 17th or whatever and give you a phone back, you know." So in the meantime, I carried on with what I was doing, and he phoned back and he said, "Yeah, I've got a great one for you." And he sang it down the phone, and it was exactly the same tunes I just recorded. I played it back to him off the phone. I said, "How about that for speed?"
Apart from relaxing with golf, Joe also takes on the occasional job for love rather than money. Night Visitors, a cartoon film which graphic artist Richard Olive drew in his spare time, is a case in point. Why did Joe score it for the piano?
The reason I just chose the piano was that it wasn't a fact of trying to do a cheap job. It just felt right. It was some great magic thing about the cinema and cartoons and those old early movies. It just looks so beautiful. So I wrote all this bit for Paul, really, to give him a chance to flourish. And Richard was knocked out. Absolutely loved it. It's the same characters running throughout the book. They tell a story. So it's a matter of picking up the theme for the policeman and then another theme for the little elf-like character and making it all work.
Well, music always pulls the picture together, and if you look at it as a silent piece, it doesn't work quite so well. The coherence isn't as great, so it enhances that, and it's added a lot of charm, really, and pace to it, where it needed pace, and just added to the mood of the whole thing. Because the style of the music is actually perfect for the picture, where the picture tends to sort of be reminiscent of the kind of thing you find in a silent film, for instance, and the music matches that as well, where it's a little bit more romantic than Joe's found a musical equivalent. I talk a lot of nonsense about what I think the music should be, and Joe said, "I know exactly what you want," and it's more or less always exactly right. Because the interesting thing as well, the way he works and the kind of work he does, he's a kind of multi-stylist, if you like, which is, I find that interesting. Because I have to be, if someone commissions a commercial, it's always different visually and graphically, and the music Joe has to write is always different.
Second page of draft 4.
Back in the basement, the Dettol creative director arrives to brief Joe. His film crew are shooting in Spain, where they've produced a 9-minute film which must be edited down to 30 seconds. Meanwhile, Joe and Paul are to sort out the music.
Right,
So where are we then?
Right. Version 1, which is the 42nd,
Right.
based on
That's
that
the one we did
arrangement.
ages ago.
That's right, yeah. Well, based on that arrangement, which is all approved, as are the
Yeah.
lyrics, what I'd really like to do is talk to Paul about, I think the arrangement is fine, I think the actual content, I think what we need to do is back the singers off a bit.
All right, you want to try it with another thing?
Yeah, I think, I mean, she's got a tremendous voice and she really has plenty of power, but I think that in a way this is going to have more power as a film when it sort of comes back off the film. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, you give me some thinned out lyrics and let me know what bit of the melody you want left.
British commercials, many with soundtracks by Joe & Co, are recognised as amongst the best in the world. What gives them their special quality?
We are known in the UK for our talent in terms of filmmaking, and that rides across commercials, television, movies. And similarly, with music itself, some very important talents want to do commercials, like some very important actors want to do voiceovers and appear in commercials. So they're not they don't think it's a denigrated art form. So it attracts a lot of very influential talent. So we have a lot to choose from. The thing they always find, though very shall we say, talented people coming from outside, is that advertising, i.e. telling a story in 30 seconds, is a very disciplined form, and it does take a bit of pre-knowledge and expertise and experience to be able to utilize that form, musically speaking.
To those people who are already loyal to the band, but also to
If getting your message across in 30 seconds is difficult, agency DMB&B have only 10 seconds to sell a new Tetley promotion.
There's two. The first one is just the right size for the new round bag. And the second one, to accompany that, will be for biscuits. What we've agreed with them is that the one for the tea bags should be the one we should feature in the advertising.
Okay.
And it's a very simple mechanic, really. All we need to do is use the branding devices we have going for us, the tea folk, the music, etc., and introduce this new offer, tell people how simple it is to collect.
Certainly in the past, when we've done these 10-second Tetley promotions like we did with the musical mug and the biscuit barrel and so on, which were very successful, we've found that the music is a very important element in these, haven't we?
Well, Patrick, if we go to Joe & Co like we have in the past, I mean, we can get them to develop it in some way that it fits with the picture. I mean, I don't know, mechanical factory noise or something of that
well,
sort.
There's probably an opportunity here to actually animate the surface design, I would imagine, on this. I don't know what you think, Richard, about that.
Yeah, I think in 10 seconds we can really only sort of show that so we can animate the factory. And if the music is as charming as possible, that will enforce that.
While Richard works on the animation, Joe and Paul set out to charm with hammer and file.
Solo file.
Yeah. Because it's quite a sort of gnome-like little factory, isn't it? I think with a few little creaks and squeaks and explosions. It's not perfect, smooth running. I mean, of course, the Tetley Tea Factory is naturally very smooth running and perfect. Need one to say.
Maybe just that creaking with the conveyor belt down the thing.
That would fit with the animation, wouldn't it?
You can't really sound effect the tea bags.
No,
But I think the track's very full. I don't think we want any more music to do. It's just adding effects.
Any more, it'll be a bit
Adding
too background.
adding some of that sort of factory.
Just a few high points, isn't it, really?
Yeah, factory high
Just to give it a bit deeper texture.
Singer Mae McKenna arrives to record the rewritten Dettol song. Like so many commercials today, it's a sophisticated mix of lyrics and images. What changes has Paul seen in the business?
I think the emphasis has changed slightly in as much as there are less sung hooks, as it were, you know, in the tradition of a miles a day or whatever, the things that they trot out at the end of every commercial, irrespective of what they're selling, you know. There's less of that. And I suppose so the emphasis of music has changed much more to mood or lending a certain class to a product rather than actually just sort of blarting the name of something at the end of the commercial and making it stick in people's mind that way.
Wrap you in a cloud, let the sun... Sorry, I want to sing Let the Sun Shine Through for some strange reason. All right. Might have to do a few drop-ins here because I've been singing it different every time. First steps are the hardest to take. You don't know the problems till you make the mistakes. You need someone to turn to, a hand you can take. So lean on me, and I'll take care of you. Wrap you on a cloud and let the love shine through. Lean on me, I'm here for you.
When Paul wants to really get away from it all, he writes music.
I do write larger scale works, but once again, not necessarily for television. For instance, last year I wrote a big piece for organ and jazz orchestra, which we're doing again this year in Bury St Edmunds. Did last year at St Albans. Got a commission of all things for the Royal Tournament, which I'm actually late with at the minute, but that will get done within the next couple of weeks, I hope.
In a rare break in the studio, Paul and girlfriend Stella Dickinson rehearse one of Paul's compositions for a Radio 2 recital. This song, Bye Bye Manuel, came by its title in an unusual way.
Went down to see my sister, she's married a Frenchman who lives on a farm in the remotest part of Provence. I mean, it's just nowhere. Sitting up to finish this piece. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I had the World Service on, and it came through as the news that Noriega surrendered. And being hopeless with titles, I thought, fine, we'll just call it Bye Bye Manuel. So it's a little farewell to Mr. Noriega.
Who's doing the operatic bit?
Nicole
Tibbles.
2 weeks and sheets of crotchets and quavers later, it's time to record the theme for the TVS Music Makers series. Another session underway and a diary crammed with briefings, meetings about briefings and more sessions. Do Paul and Joe really plan to spend the rest of their lives underground?
I'd like to conduct, but it's time, it's the old thing. I think if I was determined enough, or wanted to do it enough, I'd say, right, I'm going to be a conductor, stop writing advertising music and become a conductor. But that's a long way away. And I'm still a young man, so who knows?
I get a few commissions outside of what I do with Joe, and I suppose if they got to the level where I couldn't do the 2 things, I'd have to think seriously. But at the minute, I've got no intention of giving up this side of the business at all. But I guess Joe's a little older than me. He'll probably want to stop before I do. I don't think I'd really like to be doing the job without the support, you know. Because, I mean, Joe's very good with people as well. And I'd hate to have to deal with all that side of it as well, you know. If Joe gets angry at someone, he can go off and cool down, or likewise, if I do, I can go off and cool down. There's always someone to back up, you know.
The reason why Joe & Co are so relaxed, I think, is because they enjoy it, first and foremost. They are musicians actually operating within advertising as their media as opposed to television or anything else. And it also, the adrenaline runs very fast because their turnaround in terms of ideas, writing one night, recording it the next morning, is part of their daily life. And this is what they do. And this is how, could I say it, they get their kicks.
What are you doing up? Hey, do I get a kiss? Oh, fantastic. How are you?
Hi, fine.
Good. Anything worth watching?
Because then I feel comfortable with what I'm saying. Yes.
Music Makers can be seen on Thursday nights at 20 to 11. Next week, Kent Opera, an investigation into its premature demise.